"Kid," he said, his lips curling into a smirk, "you're in the wrong section. First class isn't for people like you." The boy froze, his small hands clutching a toy airplane. His eyes darted around the lounge, looking for someone, anyone, to defend him. Just then, his mother returned from the kiosk holding 2 bottled waters. She paused mid-step, instantly sensing what had just happened. The boy whispered, "Mom, did we do something wrong?" And in that moment, as dozens of travelers looked on, waiting for her response, the stage was set for a story that would explode with prejudice, humiliation, and ultimately, redemption. What Angela Parker did next would silence the cabin, humble the man who mocked her child, and remind everyone watching that day, and you watching this story now, that dignity cannot be bought, stolen, or mocked. Stay with me, because this isn't just about a plane ride. It's about belonging, about courage, about a mother's quiet power to change the way her son saw himself forever. Angela Parker wasn't rich. She wasn't powerful. She didn't live in the glossy suburbs that made life look easy. At 34, she was a nurse in Atlanta, Georgia. Nights, weekends, double shifts. She spent her days tending to strangers in hospital beds, and her nights tucking in her son, Jamal, the only constant in her world. Jamal was her heartbeat, bright-eyed, inquisitive, a boy who loved to dream bigger than the small apartment they lived in. His world was airplanes. He could sit for hours at the airport windows, pointing out each aircraft, naming their models as if he were the captain himself. "Mom," he'd whisper, forehead pressed to the glass, "do you think I'll ever fly first class one day?" Angela would smile, hiding the exhaustion in her eyes. "One day, baby. One day." But that one day wasn't easy to find. Every dollar mattered. For years, Angela skipped new shoes for herself, skipped vacations, and sometimes even skipped meals, just so Jamal could have what he needed. Each overtime shift, each weary bus ride home, was for him. And then, finally, she had enough tucked away. Enough to turn one day into today. On Jamal's 11th birthday, she surprised him with 2 first-class tickets. Not just a seat, but a message. To Jamal, this wasn't about a bigger chair or fancy food. It was about proof. Proof that he belonged anywhere, in any room, on any plane, no matter what the world told him. What Angela didn't know was that belief would be tested in the cruelest way, on this very flight. The morning of the flight felt electric. Jamal woke up at 4:30 a.m., too excited to sleep. He pulled on his favorite sneakers, the ones Angela had scrubbed spotless the night before, and packed his small backpack. A few snacks, a book, and most importantly, his little silver toy airplane. "Ready, Captain?" Angela teased as she zipped up her own bag. "Ready?" Jamal grinned, chest puffed with pride. At the airport, they walked straight toward the first-class check-in line. And that's when Angela noticed it. The looks, couple whispered. A man raised an eyebrow, his gaze sliding over them as if silently questioning, are they in the right place? Angela ignored it. She'd learned to. Years of sidelong glances and quiet judgments had built a wall of resilience around her. But Jamal noticed. His hand squeezed hers tighter. By the time they boarded, Jamal's grin stretched ear to ear. "Mom, the seats are so big," he whispered, his eyes scanning the spacious cabin like he had just walked into another world. Angela's heart swelled. This was the moment she had worked for, the moment he would remember forever. But then came the voice, sharp, cold. "This isn't coach." The words sliced through the cabin like a blade. Angela turned her head, and there he was, Patrick Dwyer. Perfect suit, polished shoes, arrogance radiating from him like cheap cologne. His eyes zeroed in on Jamal, filled not with curiosity but with disdain. "Seats like these," Patrick sneered, "aren't for charity cases." The laughter that followed wasn't kind. It wasn't nervous. It was cruel. Passengers shifted in their seats, some pretending not to notice, others staring openly. The overhead lights flickered slightly, as if even the plane itself had paused, holding its breath. Jamal froze. He looked down at his crumpled boarding pass, clutching it tighter as though maybe, just maybe, the man was right. Maybe he didn't belong here. Angela's hand came to rest on his shoulder. Steady. Warm. Come on, baby, she said softly but firmly. These are our seats. They moved past Patrick and sat directly beside him. Angela could feel his disgust radiating, like a storm cloud settling over their row. He muttered under his breath, "Figures." Angela inhaled deeply. She could ignore it. She'd ignored worse. But something told her this wasn't going to stop unless she stopped it. The plane took off. Jamal pressed his face to the window. His excitement dimmed but not gone. Patrick ordered champagne, his every movement exaggerated, as though to remind them of the world they supposedly didn't belong to. Then, leaning over with a smirk, he said it. "First time up here?" Angela kept her eyes forward, helping Jamal with his seatbelt. Patrick's voice dropped lower, but still loud enough for others to hear. Food stamps must go a long way these days. Jamal's shoulders sank. His small body seemed to shrink into the oversized seat. Angela's blood boiled, but her voice was calm, whispering into her son's ear, "Don't shrink yourself for anyone. You belong here as much as he does." Patrick wasn't done. He chuckled, shaking his head, tossing insults disguised as casual conversation. Other passengers pretended not to hear. Some even chuckled nervously, complicit in silence. The flight attendant, Kelly, walked by, catching fragments of his words. She hesitated. She wanted to step in but feared escalating a scene in first class. And so, she said nothing. Angela's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about a flight anymore. This was about her son's worth, his sense of place in the world. And if she let Patrick win, Jamal might carry the shame forever. Angela sat in her first-class seat, her hand wrapped protectively around Jamal's. Outwardly, she seemed calm, her chin held high. Inside, though, her heart hammered. Every word Patrick spat felt like a dagger aimed not just at her, but at her son's future. She stole a glance at Jamal. He was fiddling with his toy plane, his small fingers tracing the wings, his eyes downcast. Angela's throat tightened. She knew this look. She had seen it before. Her mind drifted back. Jamal had been 9 when he came home from school, his backpack dragging, his sneakers scuffed, his spirit heavy. He dumped his math book on the table and sat in silence. "What's wrong, baby?" Angela asked, crouching beside him. "They said I don't belong in honors," he mumbled. His voice cracked. "They said it's not for kids like me." Angela's chest burned. She had worked late that night, barely 2 hours of sleep in her bones, but none of it mattered. She marched into that school the next morning. The teacher, polite but dismissive, smiled thinly. "He's bright, but honors can be challenging. Maybe it's best if..." Angela's eyes flashed. "My son belongs wherever his brilliance takes him, and I won't let anyone tell him otherwise." That day planted something deep in Jamal. Resilience. The ability to stand tall even when the world tried to push him down. Now, on the plane, Angela feared Patrick's cruelty could chip away at that very strength. Patrick leaned back, swirling his champagne. "First class isn't just about money, you know," he said, his voice oozing superiority. "It's about class. Some people, they just don't fit the part." Angela bit the inside of her cheek. She could lash out. She could scream. But Jamal was watching. And this moment wasn't just about her pride. It was about teaching her son what real dignity looked like. Nights, weekends, double shifts. Angela had worked them all. She remembered slipping into her scrubs while Jamal slept, kissing his forehead before heading to the hospital. The fluorescent lights, the endless beeping of monitors, the cries of patients. Those were her world. There were nights she skipped dinner, too exhausted to eat, just so Jamal could have seconds. And then there was the hospital bill, after Jamal's asthma attack at 6 years old. She remembered the 4 in his tiny arm, his frightened eyes staring up at her. "Mom, don't leave me," she had whispered. "I'll never leave you, baby. I'll give you the best, no matter what it takes." From that night forward, every sacrifice had been for this. For him, for this seat, for this moment of belonging. "Mom," Jamal whispered. "Maybe he's right. Maybe we shouldn't be here." Angela turned sharply, gripping his chin gently so his eyes met hers. "Listen to me. You belong here. You earned this seat as much as anyone. Don't ever let someone else write your story." Patrick smirked, sipping his champagne as though savoring their discomfort. Patrick Dwyer wasn't cruel by accident. His arrogance had been groomed. Growing up, his father, a powerful attorney, had drilled the idea of superiority into him like scripture. First class isn't bought, Patrick. It's inherited. It's who we are. Don't ever forget that. While Angela was skipping meals to save pennies, Patrick was sipping hot cocoa on ski trips, learning that wealth wasn't just comfort, it was supposed to be a barrier. A line between them and us. By adulthood, Patrick didn't just believe he deserved more. He believed others deserved less. And now, sitting beside Angela and Jamal, he saw them not as passengers but as trespassers. Angela's jaw clenched. Jamal's shoulders drooped. The flight attendant kept glancing but said nothing. The silence of the cabin pressed down like a weight. Angela realized, if she didn't confront this, if she didn't claim their place in this cabin, her son would remember this flight not as the day his dream came true, but as the day he was told he didn't belong. Her fingers brushed over her phone, where the receipt of their first-class tickets sat tucked safely in her email. Proof. Not that they needed it, but maybe, just maybe, it was time to show Patrick that dignity didn't need validation. The battle lines were drawn. The storm was building. The cabin hummed with low conversation and the clinking of glasses. The smell of warm bread and butter drifted down the aisle. Jamal sat quietly, tracing circles on his toy airplane, trying to make himself invisible. Patrick wasn't done. He leaned in closer, his cologne sharp and heavy, his voice louder than necessary. "You know, some of us actually work for our money," he said, his words cutting like shards of glass. "We don't just take handouts." The words hung in the air, poisonous. A couple of passengers shifted in their seats. A woman in pearls cleared her throat uncomfortably. Even the flight attendant, Kelly, froze for a split second before forcing a smile and moving on. Angela felt her stomach knot. Her son's eyes dropped to his sneakers, and in that single gesture, his small shoulders sagging, his spirit shrinking, Angela saw everything she had fought against crashing down. Enough. She leaned forward, her voice low but sharp. "You seem awfully concerned with our seats." Patrick smirked, swirling his champagne lazily. "I just don't like when people don't know their place." Angela's eyes narrowed. "And what place is that?" Patrick didn't hesitate. His lips curled into a cruel smile. "Not here." For a moment, the cabin went silent. The hum of the engines filled the void, pressing down on every passenger who had pretended not to notice until now. Jamal's fingers tightened around his toy plane. Angela's pulse thundered in her ears. Then she moved, calm, controlled, dignified. Angela reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and tapped with steady fingers. Within seconds, the screen glowed with a simple but powerful truth: the receipt of her purchase. 2 first-class tickets, paid in full. She set the phone on the tray table between her and Patrick, her hands steady despite the fire burning in her chest. "You see this?" she said softly, but her voice carried. "I bought these seats. Every overtime shift, every sleepless night, every sacrifice. I earned this moment for my son. Don't you ever mistake dignity for charity." Patrick's smirk faltered. His eyes flickered to the glowing receipt, then to the boy sitting tall beside his mother. Jamal's back straightened, his chest puffing out with pride he hadn't felt since boarding. His mother's words wrapped around him like armor. Passengers who had been silent now shifted. A businessman leaned forward slightly, nodding. The woman in pearls whispered, "Good for her." Patrick opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His arrogance, once so loud, suddenly had no audience. Angela turned back to Jamal, brushing his curls from his forehead. "You belong here, baby. Don't ever forget that." Jamal's small smile was like sunlight breaking through clouds. The power had shifted. The humiliation Patrick had tried to inflict no longer had weight. Instead, it clung to him, making him smaller in the eyes of those who had witnessed it all. For the first time since boarding, Angela exhaled. But the flight wasn't over. The whispers weren't done. And the true weight of what just happened would linger all the way to landing. The seatbelt sign chimed on, a soft ding followed by the captain's calm voice. Ladies and gentlemen, we're approaching an area of turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. The cabin lights dimmed slightly. A ripple of unease passed through the rows as the jet trembled, subtle at first, then harder, like the sky itself had decided to test everyone on board. Angela's hand instinctively found Jamal's. His little fingers squeezed hers tight. His toy airplane rattled against the tray table before he clutched it to his chest. Patrick, meanwhile, shifted in his seat. His glass of champagne tipped, spilling golden liquid down his sleeve. He cursed under his breath, fumbling with a napkin, his composure cracking. The plane jolted sharply. A collective gasp filled the cabin. Someone muttered a prayer. For the first time since the flight began, Patrick's smug confidence melted into raw fear. "Is this normal?" he stammered, gripping his armrest so tightly his knuckles went white. His voice, once booming and arrogant, now trembled. Angela turned her head slowly, studying him. "Yes," she said evenly, her calm voice carrying farther than his panic. "Perfectly normal. You get used to turbulence when you fly enough." It wasn't just an answer. It was a statement, a reminder. She belonged here. She was no stranger to this world. And Patrick's fear betrayed just how fragile his privilege really was. Another jolt rocked the plane. A baby cried 2 rows back. Kelly, the flight attendant, steadied herself, then walked down the aisle checking passengers with a professional smile. She paused near Patrick, offering him a reassuring look. "First time flying, sir?" she asked gently. Patrick blinked. His mouth opened, then closed. He said nothing, but the silence was louder than any insult he'd thrown earlier. Passengers nearby exchanged knowing looks. A quiet murmur passed from row to row. Patrick, the loudest voice in the cabin, had been exposed in a moment of fear. Angela held Jamal closer. She whispered into his ear, her words steady, strong. "See? Fear makes some people show who they really are. But strength is staying calm. Just like you're doing now." Jamal's small chest rose with pride. His mother's calm steadied him more than the seatbelt ever could. The plane smoothed out, leveling again. The turbulence passed as quickly as it came. A collective sigh of relief swept the cabin. Patrick slumped back in his seat, silent, eyes avoiding everyone else's. For the first time since boarding, he looked small, invisible, powerless. Angela, on the other hand, sat tall. Not because she needed to prove anything to anyone, but because in that moment, she had shown her son, and everyone watching, the quiet strength of dignity. Jamal's voice, soft but proud, broke the silence between them. "Mom, you're braver than Superman." Angela smiled, tears stinging her eyes. "And so are you." The cabin shifted, not in air pressure, but in atmosphere. Respect lingered where scorn once lived. And though nothing more was said, everyone on that flight knew. The lesson had already been written. The seatbelt sign chimed once more. This time, it wasn't a warning, it was a promise. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice announced, calm and steady, "we'll be landing shortly in New York. Weather is clear and we're right on time." The cabin stirred with movement. Passengers stretched, gathered their belongings, murmured with relief. But there was a hush in first class, as if something more than the flight had shifted. Angela gently brushed Jamal's curls as he leaned against her shoulder, toy plane still clutched in his hand. He had fallen asleep, his face serene. For him, the world was still simple. His mother was his shield, his anchor. Patrick sat rigid in his seat, silent. His once booming arrogance had dissolved into quiet shame. He kept glancing toward Angela and Jamal, as though searching for words he would never be able to say. Kelly, the flight attendant, leaned closer to Angela as she collected the last of the glasses. Her voice was low, respectful. "You handled yourself beautifully," she said, almost like a confession. "Not everyone could have done what you just did." Angela gave her a soft smile. "Sometimes strength isn't about fighting back. Sometimes it's about not letting anyone shrink you." Kelly nodded, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. The plane touched down with a gentle thud. Applause broke out from the economy cabin, a small tradition of gratitude for safe landings. In first class, the sound was softer, but its meaning hung heavy in the air. As passengers filed out, Patrick lingered in his seat. His face was pale, his movements stiff. For the first time, he looked like a man who realized money couldn't buy him respect. Angela rose gracefully, waking Jamal with a gentle shake. Together, they stepped into the aisle. As they moved toward the exit, several passengers nodded at her. Subtle gestures of acknowledgement, of quiet solidarity. Patrick remained seated, his gaze fixed downward. No sneer, no smirk, no words, just silence. And in that silence, his defeat was louder than any insult he had thrown. Angela walked tall, her son's small hand in hers. The New York sunlight spilled through the open door of the aircraft, washing over them. To Jamal, it wasn't just the end of a flight. It was the beginning of a memory he would carry forever. As they stepped onto the jet bridge, Jamal tugged at her hand. "Mom?" he asked softly. "Yes, baby. Someday, I'm gonna buy you the biggest seat in the whole world. And nobody can say anything." Angela's heart swelled. She bent down, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "You already gave me the biggest seat, Jamal. Right here." She placed his little hand over her heart, and together, they walked forward, past the airport crowds, past the noise of the world, into a future where dignity, love, and quiet strength were worth more than any first-class ticket. The story didn't end on that flight. It lived on in Jamal, in the silent lesson Patrick would never forget, and in the invisible but undeniable ripple Angela had created that day. Sometimes the most powerful victories don't come with applause or headlines. They come in the quiet moments, when truth sits taller than pride. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And let me ask you, what would you have done if you were on that flight?